Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Room of Requirement. I have a subscriber request. Shout out to at Rab10. He asked me if I could do another comparison video and specifically requested B.O.T.A. So I'm going to be doing another comparison video of Builders of the Aetidum, the Golden Dawn, AA, and AMORC, a practitioner's perspective. So I picked the Golden Dawn again, the AA, and AMORC because he only requested the one, but I wanted to do a comparison video. So please note this one might be a little bit different from my other comparison videos because I'm going to be comparing them throughout the entire video to each other, not just like sections at a time like I had before. I kind of wanted to do it in a different way. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay. So, which Western mystery school is right for you? Comparing B.O.T.A, the Golden Dawn, the AA, and AMORC. There comes a point in nearly every serious student's journey where books are no longer enough. At first, we collect information, we read about Hermeticism, Qabalah, alchemy, ceremonial magic, astrology, mysticism, and the great initiates of history. We build libraries, fill notebooks, memorize correspondences, and slowly begin piecing together the immense mosaic that we call Western esoteric tradition. But eventually, a different question begins to emerge. Not what should I study next, but rather who can teach me? Where were these teachings actually preserved? How did the great initiates learn these subjects? And this is where the mystery schools enter the conversation. For thousands of years, esoteric knowledge was rarely taught openly. It was preserved within initiatory traditions, schools, whose purpose was not merely to transfer information, but to transform the individual. Knowledge alone was never considered enough. The student themselves had to change. Their character, perception, discipline, concentration, symbolic understanding, and consciousness all had to undergo refinement before they could truly understand the deeper mysteries. This is an important distinction because modern education and initiatory education are not the same thing. Modern education primarily seeks to fill the mind with information. A mystery school seeks to transform the person who possesses that mind. This is why Western mystery schools were never simply classes on magic or philosophy. They were carefully designed systems of spiritual development. Every meditation, ritual, symbol, correspondence, lesson, and every initiation was intended to gradually reshape the consciousness of the practitioner. Today, there are still several remarkable organizations preserving these traditions, each approaching the great work from a different perspective. Some emphasize ceremonial magic, some mystical philosophy, and others meditation and psychology. Others devote themselves almost entirely to Qabalah, tarot, or Rosicrucian wisdom. And while they all belong to a broader current of Western esotericism, they are by no means identical. Each was created by a different vision of what the initiate should become. So rather than asking which one is best, I think the better question is what was each mystery school actually designed to produce? And that is the question that I hope to answer today. The Builders of Aetidum, also known as B.O.T.A. What if the great work begins with the transformation of consciousness? When discussing the modern Western mystery tradition, few organizations have influenced Hermetic education as profoundly as the Builders of Aetidum, or B.O.T.A, founded in 1922 by Paul Foster Case. B.O.T.A emerged from the Golden Dawn tradition, but ultimately became something distinctly its own. While many magical organizations emphasize ceremonial practice as the primary vehicle for transformation, Paul Foster Case believes something even more fundamental had to come first: the transformation of consciousness itself. Case understood that rituals do not make the magician gives life to the ritual. Who is the one performing the magic? If the consciousness performing the ritual remains fragmented, distracted, psychologically divided, or symbolically illiterate, then even the most elaborate ceremonies become little more than empty performance. B.O.T.A therefore begins by constructing the inner temple long before asking the student to construct the outer one. This is perhaps the defining characteristic of the entire system. Rather than asking, "How do I perform magic?" B.O.T.A asks a deeper question: who is the one performing the magic? Everything else flows naturally from that question. The curriculum reflects this philosophy beautifully. Students gradually immerse themselves in Hermetic Qabalah, the Tree of Life, major arcana of the tarot, sacred symbolism, biblical esotericism, color theory, number symbolism, meditation, astrology, and the psychology of consciousness. These are not taught as isolated subjects, but as different languages describing the same universal principles. The tarot explains the tree explains the planets illuminate consciousness. Every correspondence gradually becomes part of one unified symbolic architecture. This is one of the reasons I have such respect for B.O.T.A. It teaches students to think symbolically rather than mechanically. Many people entering Western esotericism spend years memorizing correspondences without ever fully understanding why those correspondences even exist. B.O.T.A patiently develops symbolic literacy until the student begins recognizing the same patterns appearing throughout mythology, psychology, religion, sacred geometry, nature, and everyday life. Eventually, symbols stop being information and become perception itself. The daily practice is equally revealing. Unlike many ceremonial systems, B.O.T.A does not overwhelm new students with complex rituals from the beginning. Instead, the work revolves around meditation, visualization, contemplation, tarot study, written lessons, and disciplined self-observation. The progression is initially slow because its purpose is not excitement but integration. The lessons are designed to reorganize the practitioner's consciousness gradually, creating lasting transformation rather than temporary mystical experiences. And honestly, before I started practicing high magic, I was studying all of these things first, building the foundation. I know now that what I had done was correct because I was building the foundation first before I started practicing these rituals. When, if you don't know what they mean and you don't know what they're doing, they're not going to affect you in the way that they're designed to affect you. So I absolutely agree with doing it this way, learning all these things, learning the symbols and all the foundational subjects. You guys always hear me say that all the time. Before moving on to ceremonial magic itself, you have to have a background to understand what you're doing. So in this respect, I think B.O.T.A does a great job building that foundation. Another aspect that separates B.O.T.A from many modern systems is its remarkable psychological depth. Long before psychology became integrated into spirituality, Paul Foster Case understood that every ritual ultimately unfolds within the human psyche. And that's absolutely true. Every tarot key represents an aspect of consciousness. Every path upon the tree of life corresponds to the interior process of development. The symbols cease to be external objects and instead become mirrors reflecting the structure of the practitioner's own mind. If I had to summarize B.O.T.A in a single sentence, I would say this: B.O.T.A is less interested in teaching you how to perform magic than it is in transforming you into the kind of person capable of performing magic wisely. And that distinction is enormous. The students who thrive within B.O.T.A are usually thoughtful, patient, introspective individuals who genuinely enjoy study, meditation, contemplation, symbolism, and psychological transformation. They are less interested in dramatic occult experiences and more interested in understanding the architecture of consciousness itself. And for these students, B.O.T.A provides one of the finest structured educations in Western mystery tradition. Of course, every mystery school has its particular emphasis, and with emphasis comes limitation. Practitioners seek elaborate ceremonial ritual, extensive Enochian work, frequent invocation, or highly operative magical practice may eventually find B.O.T.A's measured pace somewhat restrained. This is not a weakness so much as a deliberate design philosophy. Paul Foster Case believed that before attempting to command forces outside oneself, one should first become the master of the forces within. And in many ways, that single idea captures the essence of the entire school. And I personally believe that that is the most important thing. B.O.T.A reminds us that the great work does not begin with the ritual circle. It begins with consciousness. Because one's consciousness becomes ordered, everything else begins to follow. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. What if ritual is the engine of transformation? If B.O.T.A believes the inner temple must first be constructed before ritual becomes truly effective, then the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn begins from a different premise. While it absolutely recognizes the importance of inner transformation, it teaches that ceremonial practice itself is one of the primary engines through which the transformation occurs. Rather than slowly building the symbolic architecture before introducing operative magic, the Golden Dawn immerses the student into a complete initiatory system where ritual, symbolism, meditation, invocation, astrology, alchemy, tarot, Qabalah, and ceremonial magic are woven together into a single integrated path. In many respects, it is the foundation upon which nearly every modern ceremonial magic tradition has been built. So even though I am, biased towards the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, that's kind of the path that I eventually ended up on. I kind of started more with the way B.O.T.A does things. And now looking back through all those years, I see that I did it more like B.O.T.A did it. And then after learning all of that stuff, because the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, they're going to throw so many correspondences, so much information. It's a highly structured system, but you have to have a little bit of a background first to be able to understand. So I agree with both. And once I became a more practice experienced magician, then I was able to really understand the Order of the Golden Dawn. I was able to appreciate it even more and understand the more complex correspondences and everything that you have to learn. So I'm kind of on the fence with both of them. I think they're both pretty equal, and depending on how you learn, um, some people are going to be able to handle the rigid structure and all the information while doing the magic, and some are going to need the foundation first. I'm glad that I had the foundation first and then did this, because it made it a lot easier, honestly. So everyone's going to be different or what they can handle and what their education background is. But all of these orders are great. Founded in 1888 by William Wynne Westcott, Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers, and William Robert Woodman, the Golden Dawn emerged during the Great Occult Revival of Victorian England, drawing upon Hermetic philosophy, Rosicrucianism, Renaissance magic, Christian mysticism, Qabalah, alchemy, astrology, Freemasonry, Egyptian symbolism, and the writings of earlier esoteric traditions. Its founders created one of the most comprehensive systems of Western initiation ever assembled. Although the original order existed for only a relatively short period before internal disagreements led to its fragmentation, its influence has been extraordinary. Much of what modern practitioners recognize as ceremonial magic can trace its origins directly back to the Golden Dawn. So when I became more interested in Golden Dawn, it was because of the Christian mysticism, the Freemasonry, the Egyptian symbolism, the astrology, the Qabalah, the Rosicrucianism, because I'm really drawn towards that. That's why I went this route, and that's why I'm completely self-taught in Hermetic or the Golden Dawn, because it encompasses all of these subjects, and that's just my personal preference. So not everybody is going to be interested in all of these different things. They may be interested in something else. So it really just boils down to what you're interested in. But I'm just trying to explain that foundation first, then Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So I teach from this perspective because this is where I ended up, because it covers so many different things. Okay. What distinguishes the Golden Dawn from nearly every other Western mystery school is the sheer breadth of its curriculum. It's not simply a school of ritual, nor merely a school of philosophy. It was designed to expose the initiate to the entire symbolic universe of Western esotericism. So the student studies Hermetic Qabalah as a structural framework of the creation, but tarot as a symbolic language of consciousness, and astrology as the celestial expression of universal principles, alchemy as both spiritual and psychological transformation, geomancy, elemental theory, angelic hierarchies, divine names, sacred geometry, Enochian magic, planetary forces, and ritual construction. Every subject reinforces every other subject until the student begins perceiving Western esotericism as one unified philosophical system rather than a collection of separate disciplines. Unlike B.O.T.A, where symbolic contemplation occupies center stage, the Golden Dawn places considerably greater emphasis on ceremonial participation. Ritual is not viewed simply as symbolic theater. It is understood as a practical technology of consciousness. Every gesture, vibration of a divine name, movement through the temple, elemental implement, color, geometric arrangement, and symbolic action serves as a precise initiatory purpose. The rituals themselves become living diagrams through which the practitioner gradually restructures consciousness while simultaneously interacting with the symbolic architecture of the universe. This is one of the reasons that the Golden Dawn has remained so influential for more than a century. It offers the student a complete magical worldview in which philosophy and practice are inseparable. The rituals are not isolated performances added onto an existing belief system. They are means by which the philosophy is embodied. In the Golden Dawn, the knowledge is expected to become lived experience through disciplined ceremonial practice. One of the greatest strengths in the Golden Dawn is the extraordinary balance it maintains between intellectual study and practical application. Students are not simply told to meditate upon symbols, they actively work with them. They invoke planetary intelligences, perform elemental rituals, construct magical tools, practice visualization, learn energy movement, explore pathworking upon the tree of life, and gradually build both the technical skills and psychological stability necessary for increasingly advanced operations. This systemic progression is one reason why the Golden Dawn continues to influence countless magical orders throughout the world. Another remarkable feature of the Golden Dawn is its understanding of initiation itself. Advancement is not intended to be measured merely by how much information has been memorized. Each grade corresponds to a stage of inner development represented upon the tree of life. The rituals themselves dramatize the initiate's movement through successive stages of consciousness, reinforcing the Hermetic principle that the great work is fundamentally an interior transformation expressed through symbolic action. And if I had to summarize the Golden Dawn in a single sentence, I would say this. The Golden Dawn teaches that ritual is not merely something the magician performs. It is one of the primary mechanisms through which the magician is transformed. That distinction explains why the order has become the cornerstone of modern ceremonial magic. The students who naturally thrive within the Golden Dawn are those who enjoy structure, discipline, symbolism, and active ritual practice. They tend to be individuals who want to experience Western esotericism as a complete initiatory system rather than studying its subjects independently. They appreciate the integration of philosophy with practice and are willing to devote significant time to learning correspondences, constructing rituals, performing ceremonial work, and gradually developing both technical skill and spiritual maturity. Like every initiatory system, however, the Golden Dawn also has its limitations. Because its curriculum is so vast and symbolically dense, it can sometimes feel overwhelming to beginners. The enormous number of correspondences, rituals, divine names, magical tools, and symbolic systems require patience and long-term dedication. Some students may also find themselves becoming so fascinated with the mechanics of ceremonial magic that they inadvertently lose sight of the psychological and mystical transformation those rituals were originally designed to facilitate. The rituals were never intended to become empty performances or collections of occult techniques. They were designed to reshape consciousness. In my own observation, one of the Golden Dawn's greatest contributions to Western esotericism is that it demonstrated something profound. Ritual, when properly understood, is not superstition, theatrical performance, or religious pageantry. It is a symbolic language capable of communicating directly with the deepest layers of the psyche while simultaneously orienting the practitioner toward higher states of consciousness. The ritual becomes a conversation between the individual and the universal, between the finite self and the archetypal structures that underlie reality itself. Ultimately, I believe the Golden Dawn remains one of the greatest achievements in the history of Western esotericism because it succeeded in synthesizing centuries of Hermetic knowledge into a coherent initiatory curriculum. It does not ask the student merely to study the mysteries. It asks them to step inside them. And in doing so, the practitioner slowly discovers that every ritual, every symbol, divine name, and every movement through the temple is ultimately pointing towards the same destination: the transformation of consciousness through disciplined participation in the great work. AA, Argentum Astrum. What if the only authority is direct experience? If B.O.T.A builds the inner temple through symbolism, and the Golden Dawn develops the initiate through ceremonial practice, then the AA shifts the emphasis once again. Here, the focus is no longer primarily on belonging to an order or participating in temple rituals. Instead, everything revolves around one thing: direct spiritual attainment. The AA is perhaps the most intensely individual path within the modern Western mystery tradition. It demands discipline, self-honesty, perseverance, and the unwavering commitment to discovering truth through personal experience rather than belief, reputation, or institutional authority. The AA was founded in 1907 by Aleister Crowley and George Cecil Jones following Crowley's departure from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. While the system inherited much of the Golden Dawn symbolic framework, including Hermetic Qabalah, ceremonial magic, astrology, alchemy, and the Tree of Life, it reorganized these teachings around a far more personal initiatory journey. Rather than advancing primarily through participation and organization, the student advances through demonstrated attainment. Every grade represents an actual transformation of consciousness rather than simply time spent within an order. This is perhaps the defining philosophy of the AA. Knowledge is not enough. Ritual is not enough. Study is not enough. The only thing that ultimately matters is whether consciousness itself has changed. This emphasis makes the AA fundamentally different from many other initiatory systems. Although there is guidance from a teacher, the responsibility for realization rests entirely upon the individual. No amount of intellectual understanding can substitute for direct experience. The path demands that the practitioner verify every principle personally. In many ways, this echoes one of the oldest initiatory ideals: never accept a truth simply because it has been written, taught, or inherited. Discover it through disciplined practice. The curriculum is extraordinarily demanding. Students engage deeply with ceremonial magic, Hermetic Qabalah, meditation, yoga, astrology, tarot, alchemy, invocation, banishing, pathworking, dream work, astral exploration, and extensive magical record keeping. Yet, unlike systems where these subjects can sometimes feel like separate areas of study, the AA views every practice as preparation for a single overarching objective: the evolution of consciousness toward direct union with the highest aspect of the self. The HGA. Central to this path is one of the most well-known concepts in Western esotericism: knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. Regardless of how one interprets the holy guardian angel, whether as the higher self, divine genius, transcendent intelligence, or an actual spiritual being, it represents the moment when the practitioner's life becomes consciously aligned with their deepest spiritual purpose. Within the AA, this attainment is not regarded as the end of the journey, but as the true beginning of the higher stages of the great work. The abyss. Beyond this lies one of the most challenging concepts in all of Western occultism: the abyss. The abyss symbolizes the complete dissolution of the separate ego before higher realization becomes possible. While many people speak casually about the ego death, the AA treats this process with tremendous seriousness. It is understood as an initiatory crisis requiring profound psychological stability, spiritual maturity, and unwavering discipline. Whether interpreted literally, symbolically, psychologically, or mystically, the abyss represents the confrontation with everything the practitioner mistakenly believes themselves to be. Direct attainment. This intense emphasis upon direct attainment makes the AA one of the most rigorous systems available today. Progress is measured not by external recognition, but by actual transformation. The magical diary becomes indispensable because it provides an honest record of practice, psychological development, ritual effectiveness, meditation, dreams, failures, insights, and gradual change over many years. In many respects, the diary becomes the mirror through which the practitioner learns to observe themselves objectively. One aspect of the AA that I particularly respect is the insistence upon personal responsibility. It constantly directs the student away from dependence on organizations, personalities, or spiritual authority and back toward discipline experience. This does not eliminate the importance of teachers, but it reminds us that no teacher can meditate for us, perform our shadow work, regulate our emotions, or attain realization on our behalf. The responsibility always returns to the practitioner. The students that thrive within the AA. If I had to summarize the AA in a single sentence, I would say this. The AA is less concerned with what you know than with what you have genuinely become through disciplined spiritual practice. That single idea captures the entire spirit of the system. The students who thrive within the AA are usually highly self-motivated individuals who are willing to devote years or even decades to disciplined inner work. They tend to enjoy meditation, ritual, philosophical inquiry, self-observation, and rigorous record-keeping. More importantly, they possess the willingness to confront themselves honestly because this path leaves very little room for self-deception. It continually asks one uncomfortable question. Is your understanding merely conceptual, or has it become embodied? Like every initiatory system, however, the AA has its limitations. Its intensity can be overwhelming for newcomers, and its curriculum assumes a level of maturity, discipline, and personal responsibility that many students have not yet developed. The system also bears the historical influence of Aleister Crowley, a figure whose brilliance and controversy continue to generate strong opinions. Some students find this association inspiring, while others find it difficult to separate Crowley's personal life from the value of the initiatory system itself. Regardless of one's perspective, it is important to evaluate the curriculum on its own merits rather than solely through the personality of its founder. In my own view, the greatest contribution of the AA is that it refuses to allow spirituality to become merely intellectual. Every meditation, ritual, act of study, period of silence, magical operation, and personal struggle ultimately points towards one question. Has your consciousness actually changed? That question is both simple and terrifying because it removes every excuse. The books no longer matter, the titles no longer matter, and the initiations no longer matter. Only realization remains. And perhaps that is why the AA continues to challenge sincere practitioners more than a century after its founding. It reminds us that the great work has never been about belonging to an organization. It has always been about becoming the kind of human being who has directly encountered the deepest dimensions of consciousness and emerged transformed. The ancient mystical order Rosicrucians, or AMORC. What if mysticism is a way of life rather than a magical system? If the AA asks the practitioner to seek direct spiritual attainment through disciplined personal realization, then the ancient mystical order Rosicrucians, better known as AMORC, approaches the great work from a broader and more philosophical perspective. Rather than placing its primary emphasis upon ceremonial magic or highly structured initiatory grades, AMORC presents itself as a modern continuation of the Rosicrucian tradition, a path devoted to wisdom, mysticism, self-development, and the harmonious cultivation of the whole human being. It is less concerned with producing ceremonial magicians and more concerned with developing thoughtful, balanced, spiritually mature individuals. To understand AMORC properly, we first need to understand Rosicrucianism itself. The Rosicrucian movement emerged publicly in the early 17th century through the publication of several anonymous manifestos that described a mysterious brotherhood of enlightened philosophers dedicated to the spiritual and intellectual regeneration of humanity. Whether such a fraternity existed literally or has been debated for centuries, but its influence upon Western esotericism is undeniable. Rosicrucian philosophy helped shape much of the Hermetic revival that eventually influenced organizations such as the Golden Dawn, B.O.T.A, Martinist traditions, and numerous other initiatory schools. In many respects, Rosicrucianism became one of the great streams feeding the modern Western mystery tradition. AMORC itself was established in 1915. AMORC itself, AMORC itself was established in 1915 by Harvey Spencer Lewis, who sought to organize Rosicrucian teachings into a structured correspondence curriculum accessible to sincere students throughout the world. Rather than requiring temple membership from the beginning, students progress through a carefully designed series of lessons intended to cultivate philosophical understanding, meditation, mystical reflection, and the practical spiritual development. Like B.O.T.A, much of the work is completed privately through disciplined personal study, but the emphasis is noticeably broader in scope. I will note that AMORC itself was established in 1915, but the Rosicrucian path is even way older than that. And if you dive deeper into them, some schools of thought say that their line goes all the way back to Atlantean times. It's kind of debated of when it all took place, and then there's the stream of the Knights Templar, and then when they kind of got disbanded, then they went into two different streams. So one of them was the Freemasons, and the other one was the Rosicrucians, and so they branched off from the Knights Templar. There is some debate whether that's true or not. I happen to believe that that's what happened. So even though it says AMORC was established in 1915, Rosicrucianism is way older than that. I just wanted to make that note. The philosophy of AMORC differs significantly from the more overtly magical systems we have discussed. While ceremonial magic certainly exists within the broader Rosicrucian tradition, AMORC places much greater emphasis upon universal spiritual principles than upon operative ritual. Its lessons explore consciousness, the nature of reality, symbolism, sacred geometry, ancient civilizations, Egyptian mystery traditions, meditation, metaphysics, ethics, healing, intuition, and relationship between humanity and the cosmos. Rather than focusing primarily upon magical operations, the curriculum encourages the student to cultivate wisdom, balance, and inner harmony through lifelong study and contemplation. So they are more metaphysically and philosophy kind of oriented, and that's what makes them a little bit different. They're more metaphysical. So one of the aspects I appreciate most about AMORC is its breadth. Students are introduced to a remarkably wide spectrum of esoteric subjects without immediately requiring extensive ceremonial practice. This allows individuals to build a broad philosophical foundation before deciding whether they wish to specialize further within Western esotericism. For many people, AMORC becomes the doorway through which they first encounter Hermetic philosophy, Rosicrucian symbolism, sacred geometry, meditation, mystical psychology, and comparative spirituality. The daily rhythm of study reflects this emphasis. Students typically engage with correspondence lessons, contemplative exercises, meditation, visualization, philosophical reflection, and gradual personal development. The pace is intentionally measured, encouraging integration rather than urgency. While ritual exists within the organization, it is generally presented as one expression of a much larger mystical philosophy rather than a central focus on the entire curriculum. Perhaps the greatest strength of AMORC is its ability to place individual spiritual practice within a larger historical and philosophical framework. Rather than studying isolated techniques, students are encouraged to consider humanity's spiritual evolution as a whole. Ancient Egypt, Greek philosophy, Renaissance Hermeticism, Rosicrucian symbolism, scientific inquiry, mystical experience, ethics, and personal transformation are all presented as interconnected aspects of one continuing search for wisdom. This broad perspective often appeals to students who value intellectual exploration as much as practical spiritual discipline. If I had to summarize AMORC in a single sentence, I would say this. AMORC is less concerned with teaching the practitioner how to perform magic than with cultivating a lifelong Rosicrucian philosopher whose entire life gradually becomes an expression of mystical understanding. That distinction gives the organization its own unique character within the Western mystery tradition. The students who thrive within AMORC are often naturally curious individuals who enjoy history, philosophy, comparative religion, mysticism, meditation, symbolism, and lifelong learning. They may not initially be seeking intensive ceremonial practice or highly operative magical systems. Instead, they are drawn towards understanding humanity's spiritual heritage while gradually refining their own consciousness through steady contemplation and disciplined study. Like every mystery school, however, AMORC also has its particular emphasis, and with that emphasis comes certain limitations. Practitioners whose primary goal is advanced ceremonial magic, complex ritual construction, planetary invocation, Enochian magic, or highly technical magical operations may eventually find themselves wanting a more operative curriculum. That does not diminish AMORC's value, it simply reflects the organization's priorities. Its strength lies not in producing ritual specialists, but in cultivating balanced, philosophically grounded mystics. The great work. In many ways, I believe AMORC reminds us of something modern spirituality sometimes forgets. The great work is not always dramatic. Sometimes it unfolds quietly over decades through study, reflection, meditation, ethical refinement, service, self-observation, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, the individual becomes different. Not because they have accumulated more information, but because wisdom has slowly transformed the way that they think, perceive, and live. And perhaps this is the enduring contribution of the Rosicrucian tradition. It reminds us that true initiation is not merely an event, it's a way of life. Now that we have explored these four remarkable mystery schools, an interesting pattern begins to emerge. At first glance, they appear remarkably different. One emphasizes tarot and psychological symbolism. Another builds its curriculum around ceremonial ritual. Another demands direct spiritual attainment. Another cultivates philosophical mysticism. But beneath those differences lies something far more important. They are all attempting to answer exactly the same question. How does a human being become transformed? And that, I believe, is where the real comparison begins. Different roads, one great work. After studying these four mystery schools side by side, something very interesting begins to emerge. At first, they appear remarkably different. One emphasizes symbolic literacy and psychological transformation. Another immerses the practitioner in ceremonial ritual. Another measures progress through direct spiritual attainment. Another cultivates the broad philosophical perspective of the Rosicrucian tradition. And on the surface, they almost appear to be pursuing entirely different goals, but I don't believe that they are. I think they're all attempting to solve exactly the same problem. How does a human being transform themselves? How does an ordinary person gradually become more conscious, more disciplined, more integrated, more spiritually mature, and more aligned with the deeper principles governing reality? That ultimately is the purpose of every authentic mystery school. The methods differ, the language differs, the symbolism differs, the rituals differ, the philosophy, but the destination remains remarkably consistent. Every genuine initiatory tradition is attempting to refine consciousness. B.O.T.A accomplishes this primarily through symbolism, meditation, tarot, and hermetic psychology. The symbols gradually reorganize the practitioner's perception until they begin seeing reality through an entirely different lens. The Golden Dawn approaches the same objective through ceremonial practice. Ritual becomes a laboratory where consciousness is repeatedly refined through disciplined symbolic action, gradually integrating philosophy with direct experience. The AA asks the practitioner to verify everything personally. Nothing is accepted simply because it's been written or inherited. Every grade represents lived attainment rather than intellectual understanding. It continually asks whether your consciousness has actually changed. AMORC broadens the perspective even further, reminding us that the great work is not merely about ritual or attainment, but about cultivating wisdom, harmony, ethics, contemplation, and lifelong spiritual development. Different methods, the same destination. And I think this is where many students become confused. They begin comparing mystery schools the way people compare universities, assuming one must be objectively superior to another. But I don't think this is the right question. The better question is, what kind of practitioner are you trying to become? If your deepest interest lies in symbolism, tarot, Qabalah, and psychology of consciousness, you'll probably find yourself naturally drawn towards B.O.T.A. If ritual itself calls to you, if you want to immerse yourself in ceremonial magic, planetary work, elemental forces, and one of the most complete magical systems ever assembled, then the Golden Dawn may resonate deeply. If your primary concern is direct realization, uncompromising self-discipline, and measurable spiritual attainment, then the AA offers a uniquely demanding path. And if your heart is drawn towards mysticism, philosophy, Rosicrucian wisdom, and gradual lifelong development, AMORC may provide exactly the kind of foundation that you're looking for. And none of these paths are wrong, and none of them invalidate the others. Each simply begins the great work from a different doorway. My personal thoughts. People often ask me which path I think is best. After many years of studying Western esotericism, I honestly don't think there is a single correct answer. Each of these organizations preserves something genuinely valuable. Each contributes an important piece of the Western mystery tradition. Each has influenced generations of sincere practitioners. What matters far more than the name of the order is the seriousness of the student entering it. A mediocre student in the greatest mystery school will remain mediocre. A disciplined, humble, and devoted student can extract extraordinary wisdom from almost any authentic tradition, because eventually the curriculum becomes secondary. The real work begins when the teachings stop living in your notebook and begin living in you. I've also come to believe something else over the years. People often spend enormous amounts of time searching for the perfect mystery school, believing that somewhere there is an organization possessing secret knowledge unavailable anywhere else. I don't think that's how Western mystery traditions actually work. The deeper secrets have always been hidden in plain sight, not because they are easy to understand, but because they only reveal themselves through disciplined practice. Every authentic mystery school teaches meditation, symbolism, self-discipline, and transformation. Every authentic mystery school points towards the great work. They simply illuminate different facets of the same jewel. And perhaps that is exactly how it should be. No single system could ever exhaust the infinite depth of consciousness. No single curriculum could ever contain the entire mystery. Each order contributes one voice to a much older conversation that has been unfolding for thousands of years. After examining these four remarkable mystery schools, I think one truth becomes unmistakably clear. Although their methods differ, their ultimate purpose is the same. Each was designed to facilitate the transformation of the human being. Some accomplish this through symbolism and meditation, others through ceremonial ritual, philosophical inquiry, or direct mystical attainment, but all are attempting to guide the practitioner towards greater self-knowledge, wisdom, and conscious participation in the great work. And for this reason, I don't believe the most important question is which mystery school is best. The more meaningful question is which path best aligns with the kind of practitioner I hope to become. Your temperament, your goals, and the way you naturally learn will often determine which system resonates most deeply with you. What I have come to appreciate over many years of studying the Western mystery tradition is that no organization can do the work on your behalf. No order can meditate for you, cultivate your discipline, confront your shadow, or transform your consciousness. Every authentic mystery school provides a map, a philosophy, a structured path, but the journey itself must always be walked by the individual. I also think many people spend too much time searching for the perfect order, believing that somewhere there exists a single organization possessing all of the hidden answers. And I have found that the opposite is true. Every genuine mystery school preserves an important part of the Western esoteric tradition, and each contributes a unique perspective to a much older body of wisdom. The symbols may differ, the rituals may differ, and the curriculum may differ, but they are all pointing towards the same destination. Ultimately, the great work has never been about collecting teachings, titles, grades, or initiations. It has always been about the refining of the mind, integrating the personality, awakening the spirit, and bringing the whole of one's being into greater harmony with the divine. That transformation cannot be given to you. It must be earned through consistent practice, honest self-examination, and a lifetime of sincere effort. So if you decide to pursue one of these paths, don't ask which school possesses the greatest secrets. Instead, ask whether you are prepared to live the principles that it teaches, because the greatest secret of every authentic initiatory tradition is this: the true temple has always been within you, and the real initiation begins the moment knowledge becomes lived experience. This is the great work, and it is the journey that every genuine mystery school has sought to illuminate from the very beginning. Okay, you guys, that is what I have for you on this. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you again at Rab10 for requesting that. I love doing these comparison videos. If you guys have any other suggestions, I'm always willing to take your suggestions. You guys make this channel and you guys inspire me every day. So I really love the interaction. So what we have coming up next, I have a 10 part series. So this is like going to be 10 videos on Hermeticism, taking a deep dive into everything that encompasses Hermeticism. So you guys stay tuned for that. Appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.